The salty breath of the ocean clung to the rusting cranes and weathered docks of the harbor, where the rhythmic clanking of metal against metal served as a constant heartbeat. Simon, a man in his late 40s with skin like tanned leather and eyes the color of a stormy sea, moved with a slight but persistent limp through the maze of fishing nets and lobster traps. He was a former naval engineer who had once commanded the engine rooms of massive vessels, but a tragic accident at sea had left him with a permanent injury and a life of quiet solitude. Now, he spent his days as a freelance handyman, repairing leaky hulls and temperamental outboard motors for the local fishermen who barely knew his name. He lived in a small, converted shipping container at the far end of the pier, surrounded by a mountain of spare parts and the persistent scent of grease and brine. To the tourists and wealthy yacht owners, he was an invisible fixture of the docks, a man of few words whose value was only realized when something broke and needed a miracle to fix. One humid afternoon, a magnificent luxury yacht named the Azure Star pulled into the harbor, its polished white hull gleaming like a pearl against the murky water. The owner, a woman named Elena who carried herself with a weary but unmistakable elegance, seemed out of place amidst the rough-and-tumble energy of the docks. Simon noticed the way her crew spoke to her with a forced, oily politeness that masked their underlying deceit. He watched from the shadows as the lead engineer lied to her about a critical failure in the propulsion system, claiming it would cost a fortune and weeks of delay to repair. Simon's experienced ears could hear the true sound of the engine, a minor timing issue that was being exaggerated to exploit Elena's lack of technical knowledge. He saw her standing alone on the deck, looking out at the horizon with a profound sense of isolation, surrounded by people who saw her only as a bottomless wallet rather than a human being in need of honest help. Despite his own struggle to pay the monthly lease on his small workshop, Simon felt a surge of indignation at the blatant dishonesty he was witnessing. That night, under the cover of a thick coastal fog, he bypassed the sleeping guards and slipped into the engine room of the Azure Star. He didn't come to steal, he came to serve. For 6 hours, he worked in the cramped, oily heat, his practiced hands moving with a grace that his limp usually hid. He discovered that the crew had intentionally loosened valves and drained lubricants to sabotage the vessel. Simon spent his entire meager savings, money intended for his overdue medical treatments, to purchase a high-grade seal from a local supplier who kept late hours. By the time the first rays of dawn touched the mast, the engine hummed with a perfect, purring harmony that it hadn't possessed in years. He slipped away as quietly as he had arrived, leaving no trace of his presence except for a flawlessly functioning ship and a small, anonymous note on the control panel. The next morning, the harbor was abuzz with confusion as the yacht's crew discovered the engine was miraculously repaired. Elena, sensing that someone had acted in the dark to protect her, ordered her security to find the person responsible. She didn't want the engineers who had lied to her. She wanted the ghost who had saved her. When they finally brought Simon before her, he was still covered in the grime of the night's labor, his worn overalls contrasting sharply with the opulent lounge of the yacht. He expected a reprimand for trespassing, but instead, Elena looked at him with a gaze that was both piercing and filled with a sudden, overwhelming clarity. She revealed that she was not just a yacht owner, but the CEO of one of the largest maritime logistics conglomerates in the world. She had been traveling anonymously to audit the integrity of various port operations, and Simon was the only person she had encountered who had acted with selfless honor. Elena's gratitude was not a fleeting gesture. It was a profound recognition of a kindred spirit. She immediately dismissed the deceptive crew and offered Simon a position that would change his life forever. She appointed him as the Chief Technical Superintendent for her entire global fleet, a role that required the very expertise he had been forced to hide in the shadows of the pier. She realized that his injury didn't define his worth. It was his unshakable integrity that made him invaluable. Within a week, Simon moved from his cramped shipping container to a high-rise office overlooking the very docks where he had once been invisible. He used his new authority to implement fair labor practices and established a training academy for young, disadvantaged mechanics, ensuring that honesty and skill were rewarded above all else. He was no longer a ghost of the harbor. He was the architect of a new era of transparency and excellence in the maritime world. The transition from a lonely handyman to a powerful executive was a challenge that Simon met with the same quiet determination he had used to fix the yacht. He didn't let the luxury of his new life change the core of who he was. He still kept his old toolbox in his office, a reminder of the night he spent in the grease-stained dark for a stranger. He and Elena formed a formidable partnership, their bond built on the foundation of that one night of anonymous kindness. Together, they traveled to ports around the world, identifying other Simons, people of talent and character who were being overlooked or exploited. Simon's limp remained, but he walked with a newfound pride, knowing that he had not only saved a ship, but he had also saved his own sense of purpose. He proved that the most complex machines can be repaired with tools, but it takes a truly honest heart to fix a broken world. As the years passed, the legend of the silent hero of the pier became a beacon of hope for everyone who worked on the water. Simon's story taught them that eyes are always watching, even in the fog, and that integrity is a currency that never devalues. He became a father figure to many of the young sailors in the fleet, teaching them that a captain is only as good as the truth he tells his crew. Elena watched him lead with a sense of peace she had never known, grateful that her anonymous journey had led her to the one man who didn't want anything from her except the chance to do what was right. They had turned a luxury yacht into a vessel of change, proving that when wealth meets worthiness, the result is a legacy that spans across every ocean. Simon realized that his accident hadn't been the end of his journey. It was simply the tide receding before a massive, life-changing wave of success. In the final scene of the story, Simon stands on the deck of a massive new vessel he helped design, watching the sun dip below the horizon of a vast, open sea. The engine beneath his feet hums with the same perfect rhythm he had restored to the Azure Star all those years ago. Beside him stands Elena, and together they toast to the future they have built from the salt and the shadows. Simon looks down at his hands, which are clean but still strong, and he feels a deep, abiding sense of belonging. He is no longer an invisible man on a rusting pier. He is a leader, a mentor, and a hero who found his greatest treasure by simply refusing to let someone else be cheated. The ocean, once a place of tragedy for him, is now a place of infinite possibility. He turns toward the bridge, ready to guide his fleet into the dawn, knowing that as long as there is honor in the heart, there will always be a way through the storm.